Welcome to the Learn True Health podcast. I'm your host, Ashley James. This is episode 334. Hello, True Health Seeker, and welcome to another exciting episode of the Learn True Health podcast. Today we have with us an amazing guest and expert in food psychology. She helps us to develop an even healthier relationship with our body and with food. Elise Museles is a best-selling author of Whole Food Energy, an amazing cookbook. She's the founder of Kale and Chocolate. She has a wonderful following on Instagram. I highly recommend checking out by searching Kale and Chocolate. And she just launched her podcast, Once Upon a Food Story. Today we get into all kinds of wonderful topics, exploring how to develop an even healthier relationship with food, as a parent, as a child, as an adult, and how to develop a healthier relationship with our body. As you listen to this, if you think to yourself, I would love to do what Elise is doing. I would love to become a holistic health coach and help people to transform their lives, transform their relationships, transform their relationship to their self and their health and their body, then consider checking out the Institute for Integrative Nutrition. This is the school that I went to. It's an 100% online program. And Elise went to it as well. She went to IIN and became a holistic health coach. And that is one of her certifications. It is a fantastic place to start if you want to dive into the world of holistic health and helping people to transform their lives. If you'd like to experience what IIN's course is like, then go to learntruehealth.com/coach. That's learntruehealth.com/coach, and that'll give you access to a sample class so you can begin to experience what is IIN, what is the Institute for Integrative Nutrition, what is health coaching, and you'll see the quality of their course. Now, those listeners who choose to join IIN and become a holistic health coach will receive $1,500 off of tuition. That's a huge amount of the tuition is covered by being a Learn True Health listener. So many of my listeners have joined IIN and become holistic health coaches just like me. And as a result, I asked IIN to give my listeners a big discount. So I want to let you know that I've got your back. And in fact, if you want to talk to me, ask me questions about my experience, if you're interested in joining IIN as a student of theirs, but you want to talk to one of their graduates, I'd love to talk to you. I'd love to answer your questions. Just feel free to reach out to me. You can email me support@learntruehealth.com. Or you can join our Facebook group by searching Learn True Health in Facebook, and you can message me on Facebook or join our group and in the group ask. There's a ton of IIN students and grads in our Facebook group right now. So you wouldn't just be hearing from me, you'd be hearing from the other participants as well on all of our experiences of how wonderful IIN is. So if you are interested in helping people like I am and like Elise is, if you want to publish a cookbook or start a health podcast or work with clients one-on-one, there's so many different avenues to explore when you become a holistic health coach. And you can do any of them, whatever your heart desires. The biggest goal we have is to help people. I want to help as many people as possible to learn true health, to learn what it feels like to have true health mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, and energetically in their body. Everyone deserves it, and it's possible for everyone to optimize their health using diet, nutrition, lifestyle. And that's why I do this podcast. So I'm so excited to bring you Elise's wonderful information today. Enjoy today's episode. And if you're interested in doing what Elise does, then consider going to learntruehealth.com/coach and getting a free sample class from IIN. Excellent. Enjoy today's interview. I am so excited for today's interview. We have with us such an amazing guest. Elise Museles is an expert in eating psychology and nutrition and healing the relationship we have with food, our health, and our bodies. What I find so interesting about this topic is that everyone, no matter how healthy or unhealthy you think you are or feel, we all, if we're living and breathing and on this planet and listening to this podcast, we all have a relationship with food. And Elise is going to help us to create the healthiest relationship with food possible. She has an amazing podcast. You have to check it out. It's called Once Upon a Food Story. We're going to get into that today, and she's going to share her story and teach us some amazing ways that we can transform our relationship with food so we have not only a healthier relationship, but that a more delicious and healthier relationship with food. So welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Ashley. It's good to be here and chat with you.
Absolutely. Now, your website is elisemuseles.com or kaleandchocolate.com, whichever you want to type in will take you to the podcast and to some wonderful information. Of course, the links to everything that Elise does is going to be in the show notes of today's podcast at learntruehealth.com. I definitely want to start by hearing your story. I am intrigued what led you to want to pursue this life of helping us to transform our relationship with health and food.
Okay, well, I'm glad that you asked me to share my food story. Just like so many of us, it's a little bit of a long, windy path. It wasn't just straight and narrow. But I really I didn't realize like the depth of my food story or exactly what my food story was until I started really doing the work. But first, I just want to start with saying, like, what is a food story? And a food story is just, I call it a food story instead of just saying your relationship with food because a story has a flow to it. And, when you say, oh, tell me about your relationship with food, oftentimes people are like, oh gosh, and it feels a little more static. But when you think of a story, there's a beginning and there's a middle, and it's just constantly evolving. And I like for people to just like start thinking about how they are, how they eat, how they think about food as part of their story. And I think it brings a little bit more energy to our to food and the way we feel about it. So my story, I was the normal little girl growing up in California, and just like all of us, when I was young, I would just eat when I was hungry and stop when I was full, and not really think twice about all the fresh food that we had easily available even way back then. But when I was 9 years old, and I want to preface this with saying that a lot of things that our parents did, and I say are because it includes a lot of us, or most likely very well intentioned. And you learn, right? As time goes on, you learn about, oh no, I can't believe we did that, right? So there were things that, I'm sure I'll say as a parent, why did I do it that way? But so I want to just preface it that my parents were very well intentioned. But when I was 9 years old, I remember really like such a vivid memory of going to the doctor's office and going on that cold, metal scale, and then the doctor and my mom whispering. And then I was told, if you lose 5 pounds, you can get your ears pierced. And it was something that I really, really wanted. I saw my friends on the playground with sparkly earrings, and that's what I wanted to have. And so at 9 years old, I went on my first diet. I controlled what I ate, I exercised more, the whole theory, calories in, calories out, measured, weighed things, including myself. And, I did it. I lost the weight. And around the same time, and I know this is going to probably sound so crazy, but my dad had this habit of waking up in his sleep and walking downstairs and opening the refrigerator and eating and not even being like fully aware of what he was doing. So the way he solved that was he put a bicycle, like literally a bicycle lock around the refrigerator door. And then he would lock it and then give my mom the key for safekeepings. So, this had absolutely nothing to do with me or with my siblings, but that's what I saw. And so I then learned at a very young age, remember I was 9, that, food is best kept under lock and key, and it's something that needed to be controlled. And so my food story from like there on, and it got like worse and worse probably in my teenage years and into my college years, was just about like controlling every bite, worrying about every bite. And I now call it like eating perfectionism. I try every diet and just like I was so not confident and I had basically outsourced my inner guidance, the we talk about intuition, listening to your body. I had nothing like that going on. And it was just all about like what were the experts saying or what's, which diet should I try next, and questioning and worrying and stressing out. And Ashley, you know what happens when you're stressed about food, right? What happens to cortisol? We don't think about it, whether my thoughts were true or not. I was definitely having that whole cortisol effect every time I sat down to eat. And so it just went like that. There was no peace. It was like just I was uncomfortable in my body. And it really wasn't even about how I looked, because on the outside, I probably looked fine or good to people. It's really like this whole internal war that I had like started against myself that went on for years and years. And believe it or not, I went on to law school. I practiced immigration law, and I still was passionate slash obsessive about nutrition. And after I had kids, I ended up going into stopping practicing law and switching my gears and going into nutrition. But before that, I had like I want to say a few defining moments in my story that really like set me on the right path. And the first one was when I met my husband. Well, he's my now husband, but I met him while I was in law school, so he was my boyfriend at the time, and we were dating. And I remember so clearly we went out to the like at the time what was like the fancy restaurant to celebrate something. And I did my usual like dressing on the side, steamed broccoli, no butter, like just the most boring, ridiculous eater. Like I could have gone to any restaurant and because I would have ordered the same way. And the chef came out after the dinner and asked if anything was wrong. It's like, I just want to check in because most people eat here. And, I had done my usual like moving it around. And I just want to say that I never had a full blown eating disorder. I would not call this normal, healthy eating. It's definitely disordered eating. And just for the listeners who might not know the difference in eating, an eating disorder will be like more of a clinical diagnosis. I was not like, anorexic. I never made myself throw up, but I think disordered eating it may not be as life threatening, but it's definitely life zapping. And so my boyfriend at the time said, I can't do this anymore. Like food was such a big part of my childhood, and my family celebrates with food, and we just really enjoy food. And I can't watch you do this to yourself or do this to me. And so we broke up. And I went back to California, was in DC and finishing law school, went back to California where I was from. And that's when I knew I had to heal my relationship with food. And so I turned to more of a vegan lifestyle. I started cooking for myself. And I have to say that cooking, if anyone is listening and they're wanting to like start healing their own relationship with food or changing their food story, connecting with your food, being aware of what you're putting in your, the dishes and cooking is the most healing way to start to change things. So we ended up getting back together, and now we're married and have children. But it was definitely a huge wake up call. And then the second defining moment came when I actually got pregnant, and I had to learn about this whole listen to your body thing. And this was before we started. Now everyone talks about it and maybe even rolls their eyes because we hear it so often, but this is before that was part of like the culture and the language, to hear about listening to your body. But even though I had started cooking and I was making great things, I still, like healing is a long journey and a process and a practice, and we fall down and get back up. And so I was far from, just being totally comfortable with my choices. But when I got pregnant, I was vegan at the time, and I craved turkey. And you can imagine like being, someone so rigid and following all the rules, and then like, what, turkey? Like that's not on my allowed list. And I had this big huge battle with myself. Do I It was the head versus the shoulds, right? I mean versus the body, right? The shoulds versus the body. And I realized, this was a special time, and I wasn't really in control of everything that was happening, and I should start listening. And so I did. And that was a really hard thing for someone who was such a good girl following all the rules. But it's unbelievable how I felt so much better. And that was a big, huge wake up call that our bodies really do know. And then, I also realized too, I cannot pass down an unhealthy food story to my children. And that wasn't, like a huge defining moment for me. Like that, I don't want them to go through all the same struggles and be in their head all the time. And I wanted my kids to have a more natural and easy relationship with food. So I ended up leaving my law career and pursuing nutrition, wanting to help other people feel better with their choices and more comfortable and confident and make food less of a drama. And I got certified in holistic health and really worked a lot with people on like what was on their plate. Of course, the usuals, the eating more greens and doing all of that. And I was working with the most incredible, successful, really, amazing people. And there was just this huge gap between like actually what they knew, because they all pretty much could write their own blogs. They had read so much, and like what they were doing. And I was like, there's something, it's not about telling people what to eat. There's something else. And that's when I turned to get certified in eating psychology. And it was a huge game changer in my own personal journey, my own food story, and the way that I could help and serve people. And the biggest thing that I learned was about how our thoughts not just impact, our like, what it's not just immediate what we're thinking right now, but just the science, Ashley, you'll be into this, how our thoughts can actually impact our digestion, our metabolism, of course, our pleasure, just everything. And so it was so obvious, like you are what you eat, but you also are what you think. And I knew that I wanted to help people shift their minds. And I too was still at a place where I needed to change, get out of that. Even if I was cooking and, making things great for my children and a little bit happier than I was, 10 years before, I still needed to work on what was going on inside. And getting certified in eating psychology was amazing for my own personal story and for the way that I could support people. And that's sort of how my food story was healed, and how the birth of the whole food story method and concept came about was when I started really going deeper with people and even going back to childhood. Where do some of all these unwanted health and eating challenges come from? Because they stick with us and we don't even realize it. And just to give you a really good example, so many of my clients and probably your listeners were told to clean their plate, right? When they're younger. Were you told that, Ashley?
Yeah, eat all the food on your plate, and especially the
Yeah.
vegetables, right?
Yeah, of course, the vegetables. And so then what happens is then we end up like, not listening to our bodies and just making sure that we please our parents most likely. And so we develop this habit that every time we eat, we feel like we have to finish our food or else we feel guilty. And so that's like just an example how these messages that are instilled in us when we're young can stay with us without us even and impact the choices that we make, that don't necessarily serve us well. You know, some do, but some don't, and impact our food story. So that's like the story in a nutshell. Do you does it resonate with you at all, or can you?
It's interesting to see the the intentions, all the good intentions of the doctor and your parents, and yet it still creates that negative experience around food for you as a child. And now as a parent, I'm sure that you have a whole new perspective. Like my mother was very controlling around food. My dad was like the Overeaters Anonymous mascot, basically. But my mom, I never once saw her overeat ever, and she was very controlled with food.
Mhm.
But because food was
Same, by the
fuel,
way.
yeah, it's interesting, right? But food was fuel, and food wasn't supposed to be pleasure. It was just nourishment. And so my mom, I mean, she could eat. I mean, she did steamed broccoli and a broiled chicken breast with no seasoning for years, and I was
Mhm.
just like, oh, growing up that way is like, oh, it's so disgusting. So like, I hate dried chicken to this day. I can't stand it. Because that's all she would cook, and so she was very controlling around food, and she put me on a diet very young. And what was really interesting is learning from one of my past guests who teaches people how to stop binge eating and overeating. She said that uh, as women, when we come into puberty, those 3 or 4 years when we're first developing our cycle, so it could be like 11, 12, 13, 14, like those few years, we gain about 50 pounds. And that's normal. That's part of our
Mhm.
growth. We're growing in height, we're growing in muscle, we're,
Mhm.
we're growing in
Mhm.
curves.
Mhm.
But my mom saw that as threatening, and so she had me do Weight Watchers. She drove me to Weight Watchers meetings because I was like, 13, 14 years old. And
Wow.
and I was, if you look at pictures of me, I was thin, I was muscular, I was athletic, I did all kinds of sports. But she saw fat on me. And so I developed that very early on, that food is the enemy and
Oh,
my body is the
yes.
enemy, right? And
Yes,
I felt
same
completely like a
message.
prisoner of my you know my body is chaotic and I can't control it. And then I saw my dad,
Wow.
who couldn't control his relationship with food because food was 100% about pleasure and relieving stress and fun, and it doesn't matter what you put in your mouth as long as it brings you more fun, right? And so it was just total dichotomy. And so my mom would cause me stress, so I'd run with my dad. We'd run together and go get the food to enjoy it, to get away from the controlling mother. And I mean, now, of course, being a mother, like love the lessons my parents taught me, and they had the best of intentions. And I'm sitting here catching myself with our almost 4-year-old, telling him to finish everything on his plate because he wakes up in the middle of the night telling me he's hungry when he doesn't eat his food. And so I'm like, how do or he tells me right as we're going to bed that he's hungry because he didn't eat all his dinner. So I'm like, well, if you ate your dinner, you wouldn't be hungry now. But like, I don't want to go swing from one, be so strict to be so lenient. Like, I think on both directions can
Right.
not be
I
healthy.
agree.
So
Right.
how do we create that balance where we, teach our children, eating your vegetables is healthy, but also, listen to your body, and when you're full, you're full. But if you're hungry later, maybe you didn't eat enough. Like, how do we not charge it to then give them a negative relationship with their body and food? So, but coming back to our own story, I think being parents allows us to then see, our parents did their best. And yeah,
Right.
we definitely created some negative beliefs about our body and food as a result of our childhood, but our parents were just doing the best they could with the resources they had. So I think it really does, I think it's very cathartic to become parents and look back and realize that all parents are flawed, we're all doing our best, and we all love our
Right.
kids.
Right, exactly, and things change. But okay, so I wanna respond to a couple things that you said. One is that thank you for sharing that because it is so valuable to hear other people's stories. And here I do this for a living, and your story sparked some memories for me. And so I just want to point out the power of sharing our stories, whether
Mhm.
you share it with your best friend or talk about it with your sister or whoever. It's amazing how, even though our stories aren't exactly the same, you reminded me of so much of just my own personal journey. I had the same controlling mom, and I with the steamed and the dressing on the side and all of that, and then the dad who was a little more fun with food. And I think that sometimes we want to suppress these memories too, especially if there's anything negative associated with it, or we just forget. And when we can go back and feel them, that's another part, like, these unprocessed emotions keep us stuck. And so when we can actually deal with them, it's a way to move forward and say, "Okay, that's how it was, and of course, they were good and well-intentioned, but that's not my story anymore." And you can move past whatever unwanted health or eating challenge that you're having and release it. Does that make sense to you?
Absolutely. I think it's
Yeah.
so important to feel it and to process it and move through it. So my husband and I have been binge watching episodes of My 600-Pound Life. We just discovered this show because we don't have cable TV. We just like stream things. And so we logged into TLC, and it's this show about people who have, become ultra super duper morbidly obese, so sometimes 700 or 800-pound people. And I don't I don't prescribe to the allopathic medical system version of how to handle being overweight, which is
Mhm.
surgery or drugs. Like
Mhm.
I don't prescribe to that. That's not the takeaway. But the takeaway for me is watching what I've really learned so much about myself is watching their food story, right? What led them to eat to the point that they're unable to even move their bodies anymore, and then watch them through their transformation. And at some point, they usually hit a wall emotionally, and that's when Dr. Nowzaradan says, "You have to go see a psychologist. You have to work through these things. It's a three-pronged approach. You have to change the behavior, and you have to shift what caused you to do this in the first place. You can't just do calories in, calories out. The surgery will not work for you if you don't address the root cause." And he says that to
Exactly.
everyone.
Yes.
And
Wow.
usually what happens is they hit a wall, they'll start gaining 50 pounds a month, like that kind of thing.
Right.
And until he finally gets through to them, says, "You are going to the psychologist, or I am no longer working with you." Like, you have to, because they're resisting for some reason. Or some of them are super ready and just like, "Fine, let's heal this. I'm done. I'm ready," right? But every single patient, and he's got like, there's like 7 seasons of this, so it's been doing it forever. Every single patient, once they do go and they start working through their issues, they share their story, and they
Mhm.
get to the root cause, and they start working through it, and they start loving themselves and creating healthy boundaries. It's like, not only does the weight start melting off, but they start making choices that empower them around their food. They start feeling better about themselves, about their life. Then they start wanting to move their body, and you just see like an entire shift in their persona. It's not just calories in, calories out in a weight loss surgery. It is at the root of it. If you watch enough of these episodes, you get that what really transforms them is the doing the mental and emotional work.
Mhm. It's emotional weight, it keeps you
Mm.
heavy, it keeps you stuck. You can't think clearly, you can't be yourself, you're just, like, consumed with that old story, literally. It's amazing. I wanna check that show out. But
Yeah.
what we should really applaud, look what the medical system, is now recognizing that, the pills and the surgery it doesn't solve the problem. It's just a Band-Aid, right? You
Mhm.
have to get to the root cause.
Mhm. Absolutely. Because then you'll
Mhm.
just the the weight loss surgery only works for a few months, and people can completely reverse it if they continue the same patterns that led them to binge eat and to overeat. And what's really amazing is that when people stop using food as their coping mechanism, they're so worried that this flood of emotions going to happen. Like, well, because food makes us happy and numb. It is a drug.
Right,
I mean,
right.
and I've been working on my healing my relationship with food and transmuting it, transforming my relationship with food my whole adult life. And it's amazing that I actually really love that you say it's a food story instead of a food like a relationship, because a relationship kind of just is stagnant, whereas a story says that you are still growing, and
Mhm.
you know
Evolving.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. That's beautiful. I'm excited that you're here today to share with us, because I know that regardless of whether people are overweight or underweight, we do have listeners that want to gain weight,
Mhm.
and we have listeners that are at a weight that they're happy with, but we have so many restrictions when it comes to the dieting in terms of like autoimmune, healing the gut,
Mhm.
getting rid of parasites, like all the things that people are maybe working on, or thyroid. And there's basically there's a way to eat that is using food like medicine and healing the body, but we have to check in and make sure we're not feeling um restricted
Yeah.
emotionally around it. Like, we want to
Mhm.
make sure that we're feeling empowered and feeling like we are nurturing ourselves, so that there are not some stuck emotions around food, since we are using food as medicine 3 times a day.
Mhm. So you just triggered a memory for me with a client. I had this 80-year-old man come to me, and that's not my typical clientele, but his son had reached out. I was like, "Wow, this is a really and this is awesome." And he said, "My dad is stuck. He doesn't know what to eat. He has had diabetes for 40 years." And so, long story short, I met with him, and my philosophy has always been to think about all the foods that you can have, like all the fruits and vegetables, all the colors, and to come from a place of more like abundance and positivity with it instead of saying you shouldn't and you can't. And so that's how I talk to him. What about salmon? And like I mentioned, like adding berries to his to what he was eating in the morning, and of course we had to watch the sugars and all of that and balance with protein, but it was all about ideas that he could do. And he got tears in his eyes, and he said, "Do you know that in the 40 years that I've been diagnosed with diabetes, not one single person has told me what I can have. Not one single person has told me to add these foods. It's always been about taking away and I should and what I shouldn't be doing." And he's like, "Do you know I'm excited to go home and, like make this food or order at a restaurant." And it was like, it's all how you say it in your own mind, right? And it was just I know it just made that's what made me realize, A, that we all have a food story, even 80-year-old men, we all have one, and it can be changed at any point in time. So for all of the listeners, no matter how frustrated you are, matter how stuck you feel with the same conversations you keep having with yourself, with the same pounds you're losing, gaining, whatever it is, you can always change the story. Always.
Speaking of story, I feel a little incomplete about yours, because I'm really confused as to why the husband that you have now, why did he break up with you? It's like you were ordering plain food, like why was that the reason why he broke up with you?
Okay, so it was just uncomfortable for him to be around. Food is was such a s- is was such a source of pleasure and enjoyment, and he was more free around food. And then to watch me uncomfortable ordering and kind of pushing food around my plate and not making it fun or something that I was excited about, where do you want to go to dinner? And I would be calculating in my head, like, well, where could I order my safe foods, instead of thinking about where I wanted to be with him. And so I think, that it was beyond just the, ordering steamed broccoli or whatever, it was beyond that. It was more just that I wasn't relaxed and myself. And, food is such a huge part of our culture and our relationships. And he just didn't want to, like, that wasn't the relationship he wanted to be in.
It's interesting because, like, I'm thinking to myself, man, that's so healthy. You were ordering lots of vegetables. You were avoiding unhealthy foods. Like, in my mind, I'm like, he's the weird one for breaking up with you because you were choosing healthy foods. But I can see that what you were saying is that you really, well, unconsciously, he was picking up on the emotional baggage you had around food,
Right.
and that
Exactly.
it was expressing as a very, uncomfortable feeling to be around you because you still had you had unresolved emotional issues around your body and your relationship to food.
Exactly, and asking the same thing, "Does this make me look fat?" Like 20 times, right? So I think it was just enough. But it is really interesting. I think that looking back, now I realize that we our food stories aren't our own. And so they belong, we've been talking about that they are, we are born into a food story, like you and I have just been chatting about our parents and the influence and how we pass down a food story. But our food story also is part of, like, the people that we share our meals with, especially those that we share meals with over and over again. And, now I'm happy to say that, of course, I still, health is really important to me and I still make great choices, but it doesn't come from that, like, it comes from a different place. It's about feeling good. And I know I feel better when I make healthier choices, but I'm not making healthier choices because of I think I should and they're not enjoyable. Does that make sense at all what I just said? So
Absolutely.
we have both influenced one another. I started this business as Kale and Chocolate, and I'd like to say, and I've just rebranded as my name just because I can. It's the big umbrella for Food Story and some of the other work that I'm doing. But as Kale and Chocolate, um, I was the kale and he was the chocolate. And we've just, he always is trying to encourage me to have more wine. And I didn't really actually like chocolate until I met him, which I don't know if that's true. I told myself I didn't like chocolate. And now I actually eat it every day. Dark chocolate, of course, and the healthy kind. But I I can see how we became Kale and Chocolate together. And it's neat. Like, he grew up loving Toll House cookies, and now I make this, like, really awesome um, cookie that doesn't have the refined ingredients. And he said to me the other day, I actually really like those cookies so much, even better than Toll House, and that was like the biggest compliment. So it's just, proof that, like, whether you're aware or not, your food story is being shared, and and you're picking up on other people's food stories
Hmm.
along the way too.
Yes, and learning a lot from them, because it's so universal. It's very interesting. We live in a interesting culture where we have an abundance of food, and I mean, I'm grateful. Uh, and our experience is definitely different from those who don't have an abundance of food.
Yes.
um but we have an unfortunately easy access to food that is harmful. How can we develop a freeing relationship that is healthy with food that still allows us to avoid the plethora of unhealthy choices out there?
That's a really good question. So I think that so many of us want to go from, like, 0 to 60 in a minute, like, I'm never going to eat sugar again. I'm quitting all carbs. And we rarely have success when we do that. So the first tip I guess I have is that like to really become realistic about and to have reasonable expectations. That's not really going to happen. You're not going to all of a sudden wake up one day and give up all your favorite foods, right? So, the I really am a huge proponent of making small changes over a long period of time. So it might be I had this program that I ran once called 12 Tiny Changes, and it was about making one change a month. And it sounds so simple and, like what, but when you think about it, over the course of the year, you make 12 changes minimum, right? Because it's one a month, but usually action inspires action, and if you're changing one thing, it usually leads to changing another. So just to give this an example, maybe you've been reading about meal prep and you know that that might make your life so much more efficient and help you make healthier choices, but you haven't really gotten into the meal prep game. So the first month it might be about meal prepping a few dishes at the beginning of the week. And usually that inspires you to do more the next week. So then that happens over 1 month. So then the next month you might say, okay, I'm going to bring my lunch to work because I'm in this meal prep habit. And suddenly you're not making the unhealthy choices at the restaurants, which are so tempting, but you're actually, 4 or 3 days a week, you're bringing your own lunch from home. Then it might be drinking more water, going to sleep at a better time because when you sleep, the 8 hours or 7 hours or whatever your body requires, you are making, you're more equipped to make those better choices throughout the day. And you can see how it all adds up
Hmm.
rather than just changing everything all at once. And I have found that when I work with my clients, when I talk to people who've had big success, that these small little changes make a huge impact over time. And that's really how it becomes a lifestyle and sustainable. So, not what was your original question again? The steps that people should take?
Well, yeah. I mean, any advice on how to? Because I think it's a dichotomy. We have on one hand, we want to create a relationship with food that we're not restricted, we feel free, there's not
Right.
emotional sort of baggage or limiting decisions holding us back, like, so that we don't become so restricted that we're no fun to be with.
Right,
But at the same
exactly.
time, we don't want to use that as an excuse to go eat unhealthy food. So
Yeah.
so how can we, because I am incredibly restricted, but I've found great freedom in it, in that I am
Mhm.
gluten free, dairy free, MSG free, any kind of refined sugar, flour free, and the list goes on and on. But like you said, focus on everything you can have, and it's like, well, there's
Right.
200 different kinds of vegetables I can eat, that kind of thing. So, but I had to get to a place where, I found it freeing to eliminate those ingredients because I was focusing on all the foods I could have. But I can see how when we start to eliminate things because they don't make us feel good, or because we're allergic to them, or
Right.
because they're
Right.
not helping us overall, um, if we also have emotional baggage around food that we don't realize.
Oh, that's a huge one, actually. So one of the first steps, because it's hard, we have these very complex and layered relationships. So where do you start? So sometimes I just tell people start by making your kitchen more of a sanctuary, right? And that doesn't mean like you're lighting candles and like meditating in the middle of the countertop, but it's really about things like, okay, what if you walk past this certain mug that has a terrible memory associated with it, right? Donate it. Don't have it there because it's subconsciously affecting you every single time you go into your kitchen. Or there's the big bottle who does container of protein powder that you bought when you were starting, some new plan and it didn't work out or it gave you a stomach ache and doesn't make you feel good. Somebody else will enjoy that. Get it out of your kitchen. So you want your kitchen to be a place where you feel like excited about being there, where the counters are clear, that the food in there is food that's going to help you to make the choices that will make you feel good. And, who doesn't love seeing, like, I know I'm maybe it's just me, but you open up and you see things organized. I mean, that feels really good. I mean, and not to be like Marie Kondo, but, you know, what like, you want food that makes you happy in there, and what makes you happy too is also what makes you feel good, right? And you're the only one who
Absolutely.
can know that. So you want to stock your kitchen, put the staples in, and it's pretty hard to create a meal unless you have all the foundations, right at your disposal. So it does require some work at the beginning, but it is so worth it, and then that's how it becomes just a habit, and how you get into a routine of making those, better choices that feel so good in your body.
So, for the listeners who don't know about Marie Kondo, go to Netflix and search for a show called Tidying Up. Marie Kondo is a world famous organizer from Japan. She's like 4'9". She's like the tiny little 90-pound bag of joy. And she brings with her this energy that teaches people to like drop the shame and the guilt around the clutter. And it's very freeing to learn her process. But I love this advice to the step one to Marie Kondo your
Mhm.
kitchen, because
Mhm.
if there's food in your kitchen that doesn't bring you joy, right, and it's just reminding you of your past failures or your limitations or your guilt or whatever, just like get rid of it. I love it when my fridge is filled to the brim in an organized way with the
Right.
variety
I
of
know.
fruits and vegetables, because I can go in there and go, oh my gosh, I'm going to make a giant kale salad, and I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. And I just see all my favorite ingredients right there. And it makes me excited to cook.
It does. And when you get rid of the clutter too, it's mental weight.
Mm,
It's when you declutter your space, you declutter your mind. There is absolutely no question about that. And it's so subconscious, like we don't even realize that it's happening, but you suddenly feel so much lighter in your body, and like talk about a feeling. That's what we're after, right? Is to feel light and confident and comfortable. And the declutter is weighing you I mean, the
mm-hmm.
clutter is weighing you down.
Mm-hmm. And go into the pantry and do that one next. Get rid of all the stuff that's has expired. I cannot believe, I think the other day I threw something out from 2015. I'm like, how is this still in my fridge? Because I swear I've cleaned out my fridge like, every few
I know.
months. I'm like, how did this make it? Like, how did it? But we
Oh, yeah.
clean out your fridge, read all the expiration dates on it, clean out and organize your pantry, donate the processed foods that don't serve you to someone, and then fill it with things that do serve you, that make you feel good, not just in the moment, but 2 or 3 days later, that you still are feeling
Exactly.
healthy.
Right. That is so true. It's not just in the moment, it's 2 or 3 days later. It's also, I think too, like really eating with the seasons is such a a lot of people will go into their kitchen and they'll say, I just don't know what to eat, or I'm not inspired. Well, we need to like get inspired by what's around you. It's more challenging in the winter, of course, but it's just you feel much more connected to your food, to the people who even grow your food, and to the environment, because nature is amazing. What comes into season in the fall, the root veggies, all the things that you need, they're grounding, and that's what our body needs. And then you notice summer has like all the high water content fruits and vegetables when we need to be more hydrated. So just use nature as your guide, and it'll answer the question, what do I eat? Like, or at least get you started. It's a great um jumping off point.
I often enjoy looking at the seasonal produce, and I think just more of an ethical reason for not buying things that from Chile or from basically halfway around the world, because my son the other day wanted grapes. I'm like, I'm sorry, they're not organic and they're from Argentina. I'm like, the carbon footprint of grapes from Argentina, I just can't, I just ethically can't put money
Mhm.
towards that. And and then so it's fun to celebrate when grapes are in season locally. It's like, yeah, we can only get access to these foods, when they're in season. And so you would just enjoy them, right? And you go, yeah, it's
Right.
grape season, awesome. Or, it becomes like the certain mushrooms come into season locally. And then sometimes like the asparagus comes into the season. We love fresh asparagus grown locally. And so as local as possible, as local as you can make it. But 4,000 miles away for a fruit to be picked early off the vine and then flown to you. I mean, it doesn't sit well in my gut. And so I wish I could have grapes all year round, but at the same time I don't choose to invest my money in that practice of flying food around the world when we should really focus on local. So
Mhm.
I enjoy that when it comes into season and then when it goes out of season, we say goodbye till the next year. Okra is another one that comes and goes really fast, and I love okra, so I get really excited for when I finally see it at the our local
The
co-op.
farmers.
Yeah,
Yeah.
or farmers market. That's right.
I like what you said though, because so many people get in food ruts, like eating the same thing over and over again or buying on
Mm.
autopilot. And I like what you said about how you can get excited about a food again when you put it away for the few months when it's out of season, and then you come back to it and it has new life and new energy and it feels different, instead of like it, doing it having it all year round and not changing up the menu. It is really nice to have that, to take the break and then come back to it with excitement. Another really important part in, like, I want to say, rewriting or shifting your food story is to also come from a place of curiosity instead of judgment, because so many of us the big thing is the good and bad. I mean, that's been around for a long time, and
Mhm.
we will label foods as good and bad, or we'll label ourselves as good and bad as a result of the choices that we made, like, oh, I ate X or Y today. I ate one too many cookies, and so I'm bad, which is not true. So I like to tell people to take away, there's no like moral value, with in food. So to take that away, to take those labels away, there's choices that are better for you, of course. But instead of saying, and the food guilt, which could be a whole entire podcast, but instead of feeling guilty about something, get curious. Instead of judging yourself, get curious. And this is a huge, huge part in creating a healthier relationship with food and with yourself, because when you can put on that like detective hat or become curious, you're like, I wonder why. I wonder why I stood up at the pantry right when I got home from work and ate everything in sight. Well, then when you look back on your day, you can say, well, of course I ate lunch at noon and then I forgot to bring a snack, and it's 7 o'clock right now. My body is hungry. And Ashley, you know this more than anybody, like we just want to be in homeostasis, right? So the body will do anything to bring blood sugar back up. So that would be like, what's the lesson from that? You learn with your curious hat on, is to not wait so long in between meals. Or, of course, it's not always just physiological. It can be deeper and something emotional too. But just being curious, like, is a great way to be able to change that conversation and to change the habits that you're having, that your habits that you are displaying and the conversation you're having with yourself.
So there's habits that just are not healthy. And I can give the examples from my life. My all four of my grandparents passed away within like a 2-year span. So it was like bang, 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 bang. My parents didn't know what to do. And so every time a grandparent died, because they were grieving, they took me out of school for 2 weeks and sat me in front of the TV. So I'm 7 years old. One of my grandparents has died. I'm sad, obviously, but my parents are completely distraught, and there's a plethora of food from the funeral, and people are bringing us food, and there's the TV on, and I'm not in school. So all I did, I was taught from age 7 that this is how you handle emotions. You sit at the in front of the TV and you eat. And I did that every time a grandparent died for 2 weeks. So when I hit my puberty, and right around that age, um, and I had no idea what to do with these new emotions, right? The hormones were raging. I didn't want to talk to my mom about it. I was having, fights at school with, whatever kids do when they're 13. And so I sat in front of the TV and ate, and I didn't even taste the food. I just wanted to be
Mm.
numb. And of course the
Mhm.
food had to be something that tastes good, but I did, like, most of the time didn't even taste it till it was gone, and then I wanted more because I didn't even spend time thinking about the food because I was just watching TV because I just needed it to be numb. And so when I started trying to heal, not trying, but when I started my journey of being more conscious about healing my health, the healthy habits, I realized that anytime I sit in front of the TV and eat, I will always eat more. Even if it's a salad, I will always overeat if I'm sitting in front of the TV, because I'm called to be unconscious in front of the TV, and so I'm not focusing on how good the food tastes, no matter how healthy or
Mm.
unhealthy it is.
Mhm.
It is that old habit of let's numb the emotions with food and
Right.
TV. And so we
Right.
got a table off of it's like Craigslist or something. Or I think it was OfferUp, but anyways, it wasn't Facebook Marketplace hadn't come in, but you know what I mean. We got a used table, gorgeous, big wooden family size table, great IKEA chairs that are comfortable, and we started having family dinners. And this was back when our son was still a baby, so it was just my husband and I at first, which was so foreign. This concept of eating at the table when I had spent my entire
Oh.
adult life eating in front. We didn't for years. We
Mhm.
didn't even like the table was for like laundry or something. It wasn't for
Right.
for sitting and eating, because I had built that in as a habit of always either eating in the car, back when I did fast food, like, eating in the car was at least one meal a day, or eating on the go, standing in the kitchen or standing right
Yeah.
in front of the, sink or the pantry, or right there in front of the fridge, or at my computer or at the TV. There's never sitting just focusing on food.
You bring
And
up something so good.
yeah, so there's I wanna say that there's 2 things. There's the emotional work that we all can benefit from, and then there's the changing of the habits, and I think both need to happen, because I
Oh my gosh,
changed
I
the
can't believe you're
habits.
saying that. Yes,
I
yes.
started changing the habits, but that didn't change the emotional stuff,
Oh
right?
my
But the
gosh.
emotional stuff was then more readily available for me to work on. Does that make sense?
It totally does. It's so funny you brought this up. I'm really happy you did because I have this conversation with a lot of my clients and with myself over and over again. It's like kind of the chicken egg thing. Like, what comes first, like changing the habits or changing the mindset? And I don't think you can really separate it like that. I think that everything is connected, right? And so you might say, okay, I'm going to start to sit at a table, but by sitting at the table, you're going to change your mindset.
Mhm.
So I see how everything is all connected, but it isn't just about listening to your body, right? It's about actually removing yourself from the habit that where you zone out and are not listening to your body.
Right.
But by doing, by changing your habit, you're changing your mindset too.
Mhm. And your my awareness of my body, the awareness of
Mhm.
your body, and I just get full faster sitting at a table, because that's all, like, besides the conversation, which is good, because when you have conversations at the lively, wonderful, loving conversations with those you love, friends or family at a table, you put your fork down, you chew. Hopefully,
Right. Yeah.
they're good and not stressful conversations, but we're sitting there, we're eating slower, we're more mindful of our body,
Mhm.
and if we want to go back for seconds, because I'm only cooking food that brings my body joy and nutrifies it, so it's fine to,
Right.
if I want seconds of my vegetables or whatever, it's fine, you can go back to the kitchen. But I just noticed that when we sit at the table and eat, I'm always satisfied. I end eating, I put my fork down, and I feel satisfied, and I don't feel
Right.
guilty, and whether I finish everything on the plate or not is fine. Um and it actually feels just emotionally better to be there, than to try to numb everything and push everything down by watching TV and overeating.
Right. Well, you mentioned so many, oh my gosh, so many great points. So the first is that you talked about slowing down. And when people ask me, "Well, how do I change my food story? How do I even know what my food story is?" And, we're all so busy and doing multitasking and doing so many things. And my advice 99% of the time is you have to slow down, because there's no way that you could even recognize or realize what some of the habits that aren't serving you until you can slow down and create that awareness. And so slowing down does more than just that, but just when you slow down, you can take a deep breath, you can look at yourself more objectively and realize, aha, I'm sitting at the couch, right, eating
Mhm.
my food, of course, right? But you might have been doing that for 10 years that you didn't even realize you were doing it. So slowing down is the first step, but also um, sitting at a table is so huge. I think I did a Instagram post recently about that. Like, in an ideal world, we would all sit down, at the table for every meal. Of course, that's not reality, but as often as, like, even committing to sitting at the table 1 or 2 meals a day makes you realize how sitting at the table can have such a huge impact on the choices that you make, right? And the way you feel after a meal. And you mentioned that you feel really, like, connected. I don't think that was the word you used, but that's where the connections happen, not just to the people you're sharing your food with, but yourself. When you're sitting at the table and focused on the meal and the company and, everything else beside, not the TV or your telephone. I mean, our phones need to go away, but where you're focused on the food, that really, you realize, like, oh, I feel good. Or maybe it might be, I don't feel so great eating that. Either way, it doesn't matter, but you can't have those realizations when your mind is on, the television or whatever other distraction. So slowing down, sitting down, those are all huge, and they sound so simplistic, but how many of us don't do that?
It was definitely a huge shift. There was a big change that happened when we started to use the table, and now we play music. I often put the phone in the charger and try not to have it anywhere near the table.
I started doing that too. Just trying to create, like, positive associations. There's so much
Mm.
negativity with food, and just make it is happy. I mean, we are lucky. We have access to this abundance of food in most places, and, and food is joy and pleasure, and, it doesn't joy and pleasure doesn't have to come from, like, the what people would call indulgences. It can come from the everyday meal that you celebrate, because look how lucky we are to have all this colorful food in front of us, and, to be able to take, the fruits and vegetables and just, whole foods, and make transform them into really unbelievable creations. I mean, who would have ever thought that cauliflower could become a pizza crust? So I think that it's really about getting back to basics and
Mm.
remembering what food is about. It's nourishment, it's connection, it's pleasure, and just, like, feeling that, and, getting rid of all the noise from the outside and our own minds, and really just, you know, going back to what food was meant to be.
What about for those who have a real block around cooking healthy food or cooking food in general? I feel like something happened in the last 40 years and the confidence in the kitchen has dropped off. When the women wanted to, become empowered and not be the homemaker. And so I saw my mom do this where she rejected learning from her mother, completely rejected learning how to cook, how to sew, all the stuff that had always been passed down. My mother said,
Mhm.
"No, I'm a businesswoman and I'm not going to take on any of that." So learning how to cook what was at the time disempowering, seen as disempowering to women
Mhm.
because it's we
Right,
didn't
more
want to,
traditional.
yeah, we didn't want our place to be in the kitchen, we wanted to be out in the workforce. But now we're coming back realizing there's a balance. You know, we swung the pendulum one way, then the other, and now it's good for men and women to learn how to prepare their food from scratch so that we know what's in it and we can have that relationship with food that it's a form of loving our body. Once I heard this
Absolutely.
saying that we should take lotion, you know, whatever you want to rub on your skin, like it could be coconut oil or whatever, cream, but that every day we should spend a few minutes doing self massage and rubbing something into our whole body. And while you do it, say things like, I love you and thank you. Thank you for being my arm. Thank you for being my hand. Thank you. Thank you for being my leg and helping me walk. And just spending a few minutes doing the self-love massage of getting reconnected with the body and looking at the stretch marks from our pregnancy and going, you know, thank you belly for being here and carrying my child. And instead of thinking
Right.
about all the things we want to change, come to the body with gratitude and feeling the body with gratitude. And what about if we do the same thing in the kitchen?
I was just thinking that
Right.
when you were saying that first of all, like being grateful for what you do have instead of what you don't is, I mean, is just such a huge mindset shift. But with with the kitchen, I think that sometimes, you know how if you have something on your list and, like, then you don't do it and, like, then it becomes a bigger deal because it's been sitting on your, like, you have to get to it, but you don't do it, and so then it's, like, more of a chore, and I think the same thing with cooking, and, the way to really encourage people to start cooking for themselves is to make it as simple as possible. So here's, like, a really easy one. Instead of a store-bought snack, what if you just sliced up an apple and drizzled some almond butter on and cinnamon on it, and that was your snack? You see how if you just start really simple, people then become empowered. I can do this, you know? And
Mhm.
wow, that was more satisfying than ripping open a protein bar, and being done with it in 2 seconds, like slicing the apple, like, and like putting the almond butter on it. It actually tasted better. It actually felt better. And then it could be the next thing, smoothies in the morning, right?
Mhm.
Not very hard. And, they can follow like a recipe to make sure there's some protein and healthy fat and the fresh fruits and vegetables. And there you don't have to make it complicated and put in the latest superfoods and the adaptogens and all of that. Start really simple and basic, and then you just keep going. But I think that, again, it goes back to what I said about setting those realistic expectations. You're not going to suddenly go from eating out and takeout to making every meal at home. But you can start by replacing, a couple meals a week or just breakfast or your snacks. And usually that ends up building the confidence, and people realize, what this, I made such a big deal in my own head and told myself this story that I can't do this, I don't have time, whatever the excuse might be. But I actually can do this. So
Mhm.
that's my advice for people. And I do think that cooking is healing. Of course, it's healthier for you. It also saves money too,
Oh, yeah.
and it's just
Huge.
if you care about your health, it is something that you have to make a priority. And if that means scheduling it into your calendar to go grocery shopping or get to the farmer's market, or some people might even want to do a grocery store delivery, which I actually think picking out your own food, there's something about that too. But whatever it is, just just do that first step. But
Mhm.
you have to make it a priority. It just doesn't, unless you're a movie star with a personal chef, it just doesn't happen. You have to prioritize it and put in that little bit of effort.
Yeah. I feel blessed in that I do not know where. I think it's genetic. It was passed down from my grandmother. I don't my nose never taught how to cook, and I have such a natural talent for it. And I didn't even know I had a natural talent for it until my husband turned to me and said, "You know, other people can't do this. So you can tell me ingredients and I can cook it in my head and I can taste the final product."
Wow. That is really a gift. I want to come have dinner. I want to come have dinner at your
You
house.
are welcome to. I thought everyone could do that. And so it's a lot of fun for me to be in the kitchen, but people kept telling me that they eat out because they burn their food. They don't, they don't, always with the not enough time. Everyone doesn't have enough time.
I know.
But you know what? It's you cook once to eat like 3 or 4 meals. Like you just make a bigger batch of whatever you cooked.
Right. I was just going to say the batch cooking is amazing.
Huge.
Making a huge pot of soup.
Hmm.
There's other ways with the Instapot, and there's so many
Oh
ways to
yeah.
cook. And you could, I'm a big, we love bowls, where you
Hmm.
just kind of roast up all the veggies and, what if you eat quinoa or grain and you have everything all and you mix and match all week. So get a little creative with fun sauces. I don't love cooking protein ahead of time, and everyone in my family liked, some people had wanted more plant-based options and other were meat eaters. So we would, just like improvise that a little bit, but the rest of it was all ready to go. And so meals happen really quickly. And the other
Yeah.
thing that I want to add in for the parents, since we have been talking a lot about our children, is that this is the greatest gift you could give to your kids,
Oh yeah.
is to teach them how to cook. And you're not teaching them how to be chefs. So don't roll your eyes or want to hang up. I mean, stop listening to this podcast right now, but really just teaching them, how to get comfortable preparing their own meals, simple meals. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. Again, a smoothie, whatever you choose. It is such a gift. And to share a little bit more about my food story, I have two boys, and they're actually grown now, and they both cook their own meals. And I am
Nice.
far from a perfect mother. I made my mistakes, well intentioned, but I am so proud of the fact that one of them meal preps and the other one said that he like makes himself bowls all the time. And this is like, college kids, and they make smoothies and they do really, simple, easy things, but they cook for themselves. And I feel like this was just a really positive part of my food story that's now become their food story.
Can you get your son to send you some pictures of his meal prep and post it on your Instagram?
I actually should. I should tell you that. So my older son is phenomenal in the kitchen, and he has always been interested. And it's kind of interesting that when he was young, all the boys wanted the tool, like those little play tool chest things. And he wanted the play kitchen. And I remember my parents were visiting from California and they're like, we can't buy him the kitchen. I'm like, why not? And I'm like, there are lots of famous male chefs. And they're like, no, he's got to get the tool thing. And we went to the store, and actually they bought the tool thing, and we were in the parking lot, and there was a family like tying up a kitchen on their car. And my mom started talking. It was an other set of grandparents started talking to the grandparents. They're like, oh yeah, this is for our grandson. We went back into the toy store and got the kitchen, and he had his little play kitchen from the time he was 4 years old. And he then ended up being on the very first teen episode of Chopped, the television show.
Yes.
Um, and he could hold his own. He's amazing. He's really amazing in the kitchen. I mean, he comes home, I don't even cook, because he is just, he takes over. And so but it is really interesting. I remember when he was like 2, making cookies, and of course, like, not the healthy kind, but just starting to get comfortable in the kitchen and make it fun. And the
Hmm.
cookies became, you know quesadillas, which then became salads, and then bowls and salmon, and all the rest is history. But it's a very empowering lesson. And the best part about it is that you don't have to tell your kids to cook. You just show them. It's the big thing, show don't tell.
Hmm.
And that, I think, is the most effective way to pass on, to leave a legacy, to pass on, how that healthy food story to the next
Right.
generation.
Yeah. So I had a professional meal prepper on the show. It must be like about a year ago. Really cool guy. Um, just not remembering the number of the episode off the top of my head, but if listeners want to listen to it, they can go to learntohealth.com and search for meal prep, and the episode will come up. And he said back, so he had a horrible health. Of course, he kind of hit rock bottom with his health, and that's what had him turn to shifting his diet and turning to food to heal his body. And he did not know how to cook. His kids didn't know how to cook. His like wife, they all ate out. I think they like live in Miami, so at least they have access to like amazing fresh food, but he didn't know what to do. And so he just started, like you said, one foot in front of the other, little changes. But he got a meal kit, that's so big now. You can get them at Costco, you can get them at grocery stores now, I'm seeing, but you can also get these delivery services where they'll deliver you once a week some, basically the ingredients and an ingredient card with the instructions. And it's very simple, but it builds your confidence because it gives you exactly what you need. So it's a meal kit that's not cooked and you have to cook it. So he took the meal kit and he gave it to his daughter. I can't remember how old she was, but she was a kid, but old enough to use a knife, but young enough to have never really cooked anything before. And he
Mhm.
said, "You're going to make us dinner tonight." And he's like, "Put down the, Nintendo or whatever, put down the remote control. You're going to cook us dinner tonight." And she's like, "What?" And she wouldn't eat any vegetables at the time. She was just sort of the typical picky kid. And he said, "You should have seen her. It built up her confidence so
Mhm.
much." And she walked around, there's vegetables in the food, and she walked around like sampling everyone like she was running a five-star restaurant. And from then on, that's what helped them build the relationship with food and in the kitchen. And that's what had him move towards like doing meal prep. But all of his kids now love the kitchen, love cooking, and love eating everything that they cook. He goes, "You can't get a kid to eat a vegetable, but if they cut it up themselves and they,
Right.
that's way more likely." You have, like you said, you're building this relationship if you make it yourself.
Yeah. So it reminded me, I was gonna say for the younger kids who can't hold a knife, another really fun thing is to bring them with you to the grocery store, to the farmer's market, and to play an eat the rainbow game. So they're picking out all the colors of the rainbow that they might one day might be the red day, and then the orange day or whatever, and you can do it any way you want. And you can play fun games where they check it off on a box, but it teaches them, to get it makes fruits and vegetables fun, and it teaches them, about eating all the colors. And
Mm-hmm.
I teach a class the National Institutes of Health, and I work with a lot of kids who are pretty sick. And I
Mm.
have one class like that where it's all about, just eating the rainbow. And it's so rewarding for me to see them so engaged and wanting to accomplish that challenge. So it becomes less about the you shoulds, and eat, or I mean, what parent hasn't said eat your fruits and veggies, right? I mean, and then it just becomes more fun. And I think that when you can add that lightness and less of the rules, even though we're not trying to pass on rules, but when you can take those away and take the shoulds away, that it really does help cultivate a much happier, and it's not just healthy because it's happy too,
Mm-hmm.
relationship with food. So you can engage your kids at any age, even before they're ready to, pick up the knife or stand on a stool and stir up, some ingredients.
We replaced sugar with stevia, obviously, in our house. And so this morning we were making, because my son just jumps right in. He says, "Can I help? Can I help?" And I pick him up, put him on the counter beside me. He wants to throw things in the smoothie, the breakfast smoothie, and he goes, "Okay, we're adding the sweet now. We're adding the sweet." And he grabs the jar of
Oh
stevia,
gosh.
and we're like, "Okay." I love that he has seen that there's a difference between, adding some sweet with stevia and then like sugar, because he gets that, sugar lowers his immune system. And oftentimes this is what happened to me as a kid. Anytime I ate sugar, I would get sick, and same with him. And so he identifies that if he goes and eats a bunch of cookies, he's going to not feel well. And
Right.
if he eats the cookies we make at home, which are basically, we know all the ingredients that's going in,
Mhm.
then he doesn't feel sick. And so I'm trying to do my best to not have him like have this warped, relationship with food, but I am really limiting him in terms of like I'm not letting him have any sugar. So how do you feel about that?
So, are you saying to him you can't have any sugar?
I said, remember, sugar makes you feel sick.
Okay, so unless okay, there's, this is goes back to kind of your initial when you were sharing your story and
Mhm.
you asked, well, what do I do about not finishing your plate, but then being hungry? So, with the sugar and the kind of restrictions, I think if someone has a medical issue, and I listened to your podcast where you talked about your medical issues when you were younger, and how you got sick and everything. That's a whole different thing, because that's really, you're talking about someone's immediate health. But I do feel like when I was growing up and witnessing my kids' friends too, the ones where the people whose parents said you can't ever have the Halloween candy or ever have sugar,
Mhm.
then they'd go to the houses that had, less restrictions, and they oftentimes went crazy,
Mm.
because they weren't allowed to do it. And, every kid has that rebellious streak in them.
Mhm.
And so I think it's, a really, like, you want to create awareness, you want to empower them to make the choices that feel really good, but at the same time you don't want to make it so that they have to snake or that they go crazy and want to feel quote normal because all their friends can have it too,
Mhm.
right? So I think that I don't like, would you be upset if your son went somewhere like to school and they had a kid's birthday and there were cupcakes and he ate a cupcake?
I would only be upset if it made him sick,
Right.
because he's allergic to some things. Like
Right. Oh, well,
he'll
that's
throw up,
different.
like he'll get sick if there's dairy, or there's like a handful of things that his body's allergic
Okay, but
to.
let's just pretend it's like a food that didn't have his, allergens or restricted foods, medically restricted foods. Would you be upset if he had, a cupcake or a cake that was not dairy and
No.
all that stuff?
No,
No.
I've had to wrestle with that, because at first I
Yeah.
was very righteous. I'm like, no, 100% no. Like, as we are parents, like, well, they'll never watch TV and we're gonna like always be in bed by 6, so we have this like in our mind, we have to be the perfect parents. There's a lot of pressure to be the perfect parents, and every single decision is the biggest decision in the world. And then it's like reality hits. It's like, we are absolutely going to scar him if we say that he can never have
Yeah.
anything.
Right.
So for me it's balance, and it's
Right.
the blue moon. So like, he had when we were doing potty training, and he did this first number 2, his first caca in the potty in a public place ever, at Trader Joe's, and I was so proud of him. I'm like, you know what, you're getting a lollipop. And I know I'm like, associating
Right.
food with a
Trader Joe's, though, at least you know that
right,
it's probably,
right.
it won't have red dye and all
Yeah,
that stuff.
right, exactly. But he got a lollipop, and and I know that the whole like associating food with a reward. I was telling him, I am so proud of you. Like, this is his first public, and now he's like 100% potty trained. I can't believe it, because it took us a year to potty train him. We were just beating our heads against the wall, and it was really in his own time. And it just
Hmm.
has to be like, sometimes they just have to do it in their own time. And
Yeah.
so it's a once in the while thing. We have conversations with him about it, and so why we don't do this all the time, why it's a once in a while thing, why it's a special treat, why we're choosing to eat the way we are. Like, we try to, have a conversation. And so he tells us his thoughts about it too. So we're engaging with him, so it just doesn't become like this like set of rules that's imposed upon him without any um understanding.
I interviewed Dr. Frank Lipman for my podcast, and we were having this really interesting conversation about how all kids kind of have to go through their rebellious time,
Yes.
but that they really do end up, just like we learned so many things from our parents, they do really, you pass it on, and whether it happens and it's obvious at 14 or 18 or 20, like my kids, they really do learn. And like, it's always about, you're comfortable with what feels like home, and whether you
Mm.
realize it or not, like a lot of people's comfort foods, and this isn't necessarily all the healthiest choices, but the foods that make them feel like comforted oftentimes are things that have like memories associate, like the chicken soup from grandma or, whatever, something that you
Mhm.
always use to celebrate. So I think that that sticks with them, even if it's not obvious at 4 or 8. They do eventually learn it. So it's not a waste of your time and energy to be showing, the connection. But I think the most important thing is to like, wow, you had so much energy today on the soccer field. Like just say, oh, that's why I'm calling my, these homemade bars energy bars, like,
Yes.
and I did things like that because I grew up with so many restrictions and growing up in LA and and going to the all girls school with, the conversation being all about skinny and diet. Like, I wanted to stay so far away from that with my own kids, but you still want to point things out so that then they make the connection on their own. Oh, homemade energy bars are better than, like I feel better when I eat that versus the ones in the package, but without saying it, you're
Mhm.
pointing out what's so positive about what they did do. Wow, you had, does that
Mhm.
make sense to you?
Yeah, because that's also something we gotta do with ourselves, which is to start listening to our body, not only how we feel immediately after eating something, but how do we feel hours after eating something and days after eating something? Are we maintaining moving in the right direction in terms of feeling healthy? Because if I were to go eat, even if it's gluten free, if I ate a bunch of waffles with maple syrup on it, I can tell you I will not feel good in a few hours. It's just
Right.
not an
Right.
optimal meal. But if I have like spaghetti squash with, some ghee, I feel awesome. Or if I have like a bunch of mushrooms and chickpea pasta and a bunch of broccoli. Like I feel great, but I feel amazing, like over the top amazing with my kale salad. Like I perfected the kale salad, which is like
Oh, I need that recipe for sure.
I can tell you, it's I take a huge amount of kale and I chop it up, and then I fresh squeeze one lemon and one lime and a bit of salt and whole handful of sauerkraut, cultured sauerkraut. I get it at
Uh-huh.
Costco, huge thing of it for like $5, and then I massage it. I just sit. You
Mhm.
got to like sit down for this. I just massage it. You can massage it in front of the TV. Like I sit down and I massage this with, you got to get your hands in there. So obviously wash
Yep,
your hands, but I massage it for like 5-10 minutes till it just tastes totally different when you do that.
it does.
And
Yeah, and your
then
body can break it down too more.
exactly, exactly. And then I add a spoonful of tahini. The tahini is the sesame, just basically ground sesame, and I got it at Trader Joe's, the last one. Then I can add, garlic if I want, or smoked paprika, and then I add an entire avocado, and I mash it up again with my hands, and that's it. So there's no need
Sounds
for
great.
oil, there's no need for dressing. That's the dressing. And I make and then sometimes what I do is I'll also get in Whole Foods right beside the vegetables in the salad section, they have like a coleslaw that's just a pre-mix where it's just like chopped up basically different kinds
Oh,
of
right. Mhm.
yeah, so there's no dressing, it's just a basically chopped up cabbage,
Cabbage,
and
right, which is so good for
it's
the gut.
so good. And then shaved broccoli with some shaved carrot is another one. And I'll take one or two of those packages, and just it's more like, for me, like I could totally make that from scratch. Like I could get out my food processor and do that, but lately I've just been like, this is so convenient.
You had mentioned how do you get someone to get cooking, and
Mhm.
that is another way. There are little
Mhm.
cheats that are not really cheats, but there are little ways that, we live in a world that's more convenient, but when you're going to the right places and know that there aren't extra ingredients, it's just pure whole
Yeah.
foods. That's a great way
Yeah.
to get someone cooking, to do things like that, to have the zucchini noodles already
Mhm.
spiralized to get those, the cabbage already chopped and sliced and ready to go into a salad. So sorry, your salad sounds
Oh,
good.
no, 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 absolutely, and I totally agree with you, like, the reason why I'm buying actually just to, like, admit the reason why I've been buying the pre-prepped, veggies is I dropped my food processor, and
Oh no.
I know, I'm so bummed. I love Breville, but and I love their food processor, but I dropped it, and it's shattered, the entire food processor, the upper part of it, the plastic shattered, and I've been waiting for it to be back in stock, but every time I go to the website, it's not in stock. So I've had to use either other things in my kitchen because I have a bunch of other sort of related to food processors, like the veggie bullet, which makes spiralized in like 3 seconds because it's a electric spiralizer. But yeah, to finish the salad, I add basically more either chopped veggies or whatever. You can chop them yourself or get it pre-chopped for you, and mix it together. And then I'll cover it with some walnuts or pine nuts or pumpkin seeds. So pumpkin seeds are really high in protein, and walnuts are great healthy fats, and it has a wonderful crunch. And then if you want to take it to the next level, chop up an apple because then that is like
Yeah.
sweet and crunch. And so
Mhm.
yeah, so that I will make so much of that I like a huge bowl of it, and then put it away in the fridge. And it'll feed us like at least 4 or 6 meals because I make a huge bowl of it, and it's a whole meal. It feels very filling. And sometimes I'll use 2 avocados because I make a huge batch of it, but it'll definitely last us for 2 or 3 days.
That's so great. Yeah, and having food prep like that, that when it's a game changer when you open up the refrigerator and you don't have to think, and you don't have you it kind of it's like a excuse proof excuse proof way, to get ready for the week by having all that food ready and waiting.
Right, right. Do you have a recipe that I know because you've written some amazing recipes, you've published some amazing recipes. Do you have one that you'd like to share with us?
Sure, let's think. So I have so many recipes, so I'm going to have you guide me a little bit. You just shared a salad, so we'll skip salads, right? Even though that is one of my fortes. What kind of recipe are you looking for?
Well, let's give people a guilt-free recipe that is easy in the kitchen, but is like will give them a lot of confidence to want to keep trying new things. So, what's something that tastes really delicious, that's very healthy, and will build confidence in the kitchen?
Okay, let me think about that for just 1 second. Um, how do you feel about a loaded sweet potato? Does
Yeah,
that sound good?
tell us about
Yeah,
your lotus sweet
so
potato.
I love sweet potatoes, especially in the colder months, like when the root veggies are I mean, we eat sweet potatoes year round, but they're really great for serotonin production, and I think that people love sweet potatoes, and we're probably because we feel good when we eat them. And this is something you could actually make the sweet potato ahead of time. Let's say you have started
Mhm.
meal prepping a little bit on Sunday, or you could do it right at when you're about to eat. And there are a bunch of different ways. I have two recipes on my website right now, or three, but we'll talk about two because we'll go savory. One is a fiesta one, which has the tomatoes and the zucchini and the corn, and I use black beans as the protein source. And you can add, this is all saute. So the sweet potatoes cooked, and then you saute all the filling, and then you can put like an avocado sauce, kind of like what you were talking about with the squeeze of lime, and how you use avocado as a sauce instead of oil,
Mhm.
and the and some cilantro or whatever spices you want, a little bit of jalapeno, and just put that on the top. It's like a big party in your sweet potato, and it's colorful and it's fun and it's super easy to make, and it's a whole meal. And if you're everybody's different with whether they can do plant-based protein or need some animal protein. So you could do this with animal, adding in like some sauteed chicken or whatever, feels good to you. And that's one of my sweet potatoes. It's probably my all-time favorite meal because I just feel really great when I make it, and it also works really well to have to heat and have the next day. So the other one is Moroccan spiced, same sort of process, but instead of doing like the fiesta more like Mexican inspired meal, you go more for those like Middle Eastern spices like the cumin and even turmeric being thrown in there. And it again, you just saute whatever vegetables. I think that one has I have to remember exactly what vegetables, but you can use any vegetables that you have. But I do a Moroccan spice chickpea with it, and that's the protein source, and a tahini drizzle on top, and it is so good, and it just keeps you really satisfied. And of course, the color is so like fun to see and eat, and you're getting all the phytonutrients from all the deeply pigmented fruits and well, no fruits in this, but deeply pigmented vegetables, and yeah, I like it because it's just loaded, like we talked about people like abundance. The other thing that is a really great way to build confidence is to do these. Have you heard of the sheet pan, one pan meals?
Do tell.
Do tell. So I have actually this is a little backstory. Those came out. I put those recipes up because I loved the filling from my sweet potatoes so much. Like these need to be a meal in and of itself. So this is kind of like the sheet pan version with similar ingredients. So I have a fiesta sheet pan dinner and a Moroccan spice sheet pan dinner. But really, I think learning that technique of roasting everything on a tray, a single tray, I always say no stress, no mess, no stress. So it's you literally cook it on one or two sheet pans. You have a meal and you can have leftovers to toss into a salad or some sort of a bowl the next day. And it just is you almost don't need a recipe, but if you don't have confidence in the kitchen, you should. We can link to those in the show notes if you want. I can send those to you. But it's just an easy way to cook a dinner in 30 minutes and to be able to have some leftover for the rest of the week and not to have a ton of dishes to clean up. I mean, that's, also part of it. People don't want to have to put in that much effort. I also think soups are very forgiving and teach people the whole concept of meal prep and having food ready and waiting, and how that's such a great way to go into your week and have a lot of success with your choices. I have a ton of soup recipes, but the one that just popped up in my head is my coconut curry soup because it's easy and it's fun and it's warming and it has spices that are anti-inflammatory. So if you want to protect your immune system, it kind of has it all. So that's a really good hearty but plant-based soup
And can we
to
find these
have.
recipes on kaleandchocolate.com?
Well, I want to say yes, but Kale and Chocolate is now my name,
Right.
elisemuseles.com, but you will get redirected. But it's Elise, last name is Museles, Museles.com. And it's all in the recipe section. There's a search in the recipe section, and you can find it there. And just to give one fun dish, um, at the I love skillet desserts or snacks because they're so easy to make and they're fun, and you can cook it really quickly. So I'm about to publish my skillet, a chocolate chip skillet cookie, and it's the cookie that I was referring to that my husband said was better than Toll House. So I'm going to have that on my website shortly, and then maybe by the time this podcast comes out, we'll have it all ready to go. And then also, I do something a really quick snack or dessert. I saute like when apples come into season. It's amazing. You saute apples in a tiny bit of coconut oil, and then you just add some cinnamon, a little drizzle of nut butter, and just if you want to have fun toppings on there too, whatever I sometimes do freeze dried raspberries. They add color, but it's just this skillet desserts or snacks are really fun and an introduction to cooking, that is super easy and accessible to pretty much anyone who has a skillet.
Very cool. I love it. So far, we are walking into our kitchen, creating a sanctuary. Um, we are eating at a dinner table. and we're tuning into our body and the language that we use. So instead of using like words like I can't have this and I shouldn't have had that, so the guilt driven words, we are shifting our focus onto all the wonderful healthy foods we can have, and looking at our self-talk around food to shift our conversation towards gratitude and focusing on what we do appreciate.
Mm.
After we've done all this, what steps do you recommend we take to unearth and heal some unconscious limiting decisions that we created around food that might be harming us or might be impeding our growth?
Okay, so one of the more next level steps that um, I teach and I have my clients do is really to ask to take a more proactive approach to food instead of reactive. So I've even heard both of us say in this conversation, how something makes us feel like, yeah, I don't feel very good. Well, we can almost avoid that whole conversation because instead of saying, oh, it made me sleepy or it made me tired, before you even eat, before you go grocery shopping, before you sit down, ask yourself, how do I want to feel? And this is a much more proactive instead of being reactive. So it's really about choosing your mood first and then picking your food accordingly. So, what do I mean by that? At the beginning of the day, I always like to feel, my words are energized and focused. So, what I have a few blog posts that I would be happy to provide those links. But let's say for energy, like I start every day with either a green tea or a matcha latte. And matcha, for those listeners who don't know, is a green tea. It's filled with antioxidants and it's a little bit more nutrient dense than typical green tea because you actually eat the whole tea, you drink rather the whole tea leaf. And it has L-theanine, which helps you to raise your energy levels, but unlike the caffeine in coffee, it is a slow and steady raise of energy. It's not that rapid, energy release. It's just slower and steady, so you feel good for a longer period of time. So what else? Like the good healthy carbs will give you energy in the morning to make it lasting. You want to add some sort of a healthy fat so that it takes longer to break down and stays in your system longer so you have even and steady blood sugar. So it's really about saying, how do I want to feel? I want to feel energized, and what foods give me energy. And you can come up with a list, but what gives me energy may not give you, Ashley, for example, energy,
Mm-hmm,
right?
mm-hmm.
And it's about really being connected to your body and how you feel with food. And we've kind of had this as an underlying theme. Like even with your son, you were saying, he doesn't feel good with this, or that works for him. It's the same thing, but it's really about being able to identify, again, being connected back to your body, what that is. And it's so empowering to think about what food can do for you and not to you. Does that distinction, we say, oh, for you is really a positive way of looking
Mm-hmm.
at food, like brain food, mood boosting food, food that's good. I mentioned turmeric. I want to feel healthy. You want to add things like turmeric and other immune boosting, like you talked about the sour, I think you said sauerkraut,
Mm-hmm.
but the fermented food that you get at Costco, adding a dollop of that to your food is being proactive because
Mm-hmm.
you're supporting your gut health, which basically supports every other, your immune system and now your mood. There's such a huge connection between your gut and your brain and thoughts and mood. With now, you can probably clear up this. exact number, but it's now they're saying like 90% of your serotonin is produced in your gut. So you do want to make choices where you are nourishing your gut. So really being proactive and thinking about your whole person, your mood, and your health with the choices that you make is going to empower you, to be like you're in the driver's seat. It's up to you. You
Mhm.
get to make that choice, what's at the end of your fork.
I love it. So you're shifting your focus away from the away froms, because I think so much of us, so many of us are hardwired to focus on what we don't want. So our motivation comes from the away from, or comes from the stick instead of the carrot, and being like, I don't want to be fat, I don't want to be sick, I don't want to feel sick, I don't want this. And then the guilt, anytime we did eat something quote unquote, not optimal or not healthy, we're saying, I shouldn't have eaten that. I'm making bad choices. I'm bad for eating that or whatever. So it's always the focusing on what we don't want. And you're saying shift your focus to be on what you do want. So look
Mm-hmm.
at your empty plate and go, I want to fill this plate with food that is nourishing for my gut, nourishing for my body. So you can ask questions like, what's really, healing for my body? What makes me feel amazing even hours after eating it? And focus on that. And if we start having cravings for food, or go towards food that helped us, like highly processed, like Twinkies, right? Or ice cream, stuff that we in the moment feel amazing, but then we feel really, we just don't feel our best hours later, and then we're guilting ourselves. So if that's, how do we break that cycle?
That's a great question. I'm glad you asked that. So I I don't like to tell people never to have things. So there's kind of two parts of this conversation. So with the food guilt, um, you have to make a decision. Either you have it, right, and enjoy it, or you decide, I don't really feel great emotionally, physically, so I'm not going to have it. But the worst is to have that food and then feel bad about it because you don't even get to enjoy it, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
So, and sometimes when you give yourself permission to have it, it makes it less of that like kind of coveted food, and you find that you had a bite and you didn't really want it after all. But having, all these rules around it is definitely not the way to go about making those choices. And I think it's okay to, if you really want something, if it reminds you of, a special time and place and like the healthified version of it is just not going to do, then have it. And then your next choice is just one meal or snack away, right? And you can make that a better choice, you know, for you at the moment and get back on track or whatever. But I think that not allowing yourself to have foods that don't fall into the category, and to beat yourself up is just as damaging, as eating the food. And and the guilt is just so it's a cycle that really serves no productive purpose. And
Mm.
if you could banish the guilt and then either, make that choice. But I think it's really important to say, I don't really feel good afterwards. I'm not going to have it, to be able to recognize that too. And I've heard you say that a few times, and like we all know that. We know that there's certain foods, no matter how much we actually like them, they don't like us. Right. And so you can make a decision, I'm not going to have that because I feel so crappy afterwards. And and that's okay, right? And to find something else that'll bring you just as much pleasure, whether it's a healthified version or not, it'll bring you just as much pleasure and you feel good along the way. So it's really important. Food guilt is so huge with people, and it's just it's a waste of time and energy. It it serves absolutely zero purpose.
I love it. It doesn't help us at all. Why do we create food guilt if it's only harming us and it doesn't help us?
I think is that is the $1,000,000 question. Why do we create food guilt? I think it's because of all the rules that we set up for ourselves and the labels of good and bad. And then it just, I mean, society probably doesn't help, right? All the you shoulds and shouldn'ts, and I, I think the conversation though is shifting a little bit. I don't notice as much. I'm sure people still are grappling with it, but we're talking about it, how giving yourself permission is okay. And, there's all this conversation about balance and about not being perfect. And I think it's different than what we were talking about with our moms, and like that was definitely passed on to us. And now people realize that there's no such thing as a perfect diet. And I see the conversation shifting a little bit, where food guilt, you know, it's not taking over our lives in the same way that I think it did with our mothers. Um, I don't know. It's just I don't have that food guilt anymore, but it was like my middle name for so long. And I think about all that energy when I could have used it towards something so much more productive. And the worst part is what it does to you. It damages you emotionally, but it also has an impact on your physiology. I mean, that's a
Hmm.
stress to those negative thoughts. It's like you go into stress response, right? Because whether you actually did something wrong or not, or stressful, like when you're having those thoughts, that's when your cortisol levels jump, and all you have that whole physiological stress response sitting at the table. Should I be eating this? Shouldn't be eating this. I'm so bad. Oh my God, I really shouldn't do this. I'm going to feel like tomorrow, and like that is stressful,
Hmm.
whether it's true or not. So I always like to give the example, like if you're being chased by the tiger or you're not being chased by the tiger, if you think you're being chased by the tiger, you're still going to have that, fight or flight. And it's the same thing with the food guilt, whether it's ridiculous or not, or the things that you're thinking about are going to actually happen. I'm going to gain weight or not. It doesn't matter because you're creating that anxiety and stress in your system by having those anxious thoughts.
I had a woman on the show. She's actually coming back on the show, Kristen Bowen, the founder of Living the Good Life Naturally. I talk about her magnesium soak all the time, which I'm in love with. She shared something really interesting and insightful. She was leading a huge group of women through healing and balancing their hormones using, diet and, nutrition and, working on every aspect to heal their hormones. And most of the women immediately saw results and we're balancing their hormones. Their, hot flashes are going away, that kind of thing. And by the time the course was done, there was a small handful, maybe like 5 or 6 women who, no matter what, they were eating all the right foods, taking the supplements, doing everything, and they still couldn't get a shift. They still had all their hormone problems. And so she said to them, listen, I'm willing to work with you for free. I really care about you guys. I want to get to the root of this. And so she got on a call with them. And by the time she was on the call, she figured it out. All of them had something in common. They all were carrying a tremendous amount of shame with them, which is, guilt and shame go hand in hand. And what she noticed is once they worked through the shame and they were able to, heal what was constantly having them trigger feeling shame about themselves, that's when they got results. And I've heard this from other people that holding on to guilt and shame is definitely a way of continuing to hold on to a physical illness.
Mhm. Yeah, I always say too that when you go back to like your food story and where your unwanted health and eating challenge might have come from, it helps to release that veil of shame. Like you're like, oh my gosh, that's why I do that, or that's why I feel that way. And that can help you, move past it and set yourself up for a brand new chapter.
Do you have any tools or advice you can give to us to help us to heal and reduce and eventually eliminate shame and guilt? Is do you have, because it's one way to say we should do it, but how? Do you have any actionable steps we can take?
So a lot of the shame and guilt comes from our own internal dialogue that we're having with ourselves.
Mm,
So first becoming aware of how you're talking to yourself. You know, it's hard because a lot of times we're having the same conversations over and over and we don't even realize what we're saying. So that's really becoming awake and conscious. And, you know, we hear this like, would I talk to a friend like this? Would I talk to someone
mhm,
I love? Would I talk to my sister? And if the answer is no, then you need to, you know, shift that conversation. And it's really hard and it might feel really awkward at first, but instead of, you know, beating yourself up, saying, okay, like it goes back to the curiosity that I talked about before. What can I do differently? What can I learn from this? You know, our challenges are always lessons. What can I learn from this? How can I handle this differently the next time? Right. So those are just immediate thoughts. But I always give the example of using like it's a radio station. We have like this channel that we play over and over, right, in our own minds. So you have to do something to disrupt that thought pattern because it's so ingrained. So you
mhm.
want to like almost like get up and imagine turning the dial. New channel, new song, and it sounds ridiculous, but when you can stop the flow, then you know, then you're putting yourself into a place to be able to have a new conversation. It might take writing down on a piece of paper when you're not in the moment, you know, how would I say this to someone I love? So, you know, everyone take out their pen and paper or on the note section of your phone and write, okay, that wasn't the best choice, but, you know, how can I do things differently? Or again, you know, how could I say things differently? And so that I can move on and make a better choice next time or be okay with my decision and just, you know, move on to the next meal. And so I think actually having the conversation with yourself when you're not in the moment too helps you
Mm.
to be more equipped to have the same conversation with yourself when you are in the moment.
I liked your advice about shifting almost the environment, like your get up and, even shifting your physiology. So, if you're in the middle of giving yourself a guilt trip, like go do something else, like move your body in a different way and
Right.
get unstuck and put a wedge, like a pattern interrupt between you and
Hmm.
that old pattern. That's why I like sitting at the table. If you've spent your whole life sitting in front of the TV and then feeling guilty about overeating, sitting at the table is like you're having a whole new conversation with yourself, and now you're listening to your thoughts, and it's like there's less distractions. So now you've got
Yeah.
more room to go, is that really what I want to think to myself? Hey, wait a second. Let's shift the focus. So I love your advice about shifting the focus.
Also, yeah, the other thing is like before you make a decision on what to eat or, you know, before you even go there, like take a few deep breaths. It's amazing. You and I had spoken about this, the power of the breath. It's almost like a barrier, you know, like it can interrupt your thoughts, it can interrupt,
Mhm.
you know, what it can bring you back home to yourself and just take a moment and take like 3, whatever, you know, just deep inhale and exhale. And it makes you be right there. You know, you're fully present. And when you're present and you're mindful, you're more equipped to make better decisions, you know, instead of just like being in that anxious, stressed out state and doing something. And the other thing is really if you know that you have a pattern, like you have to ask yourself the hard questions, whether it's in the moment or, you know, when it's not. Why do I binge eat? Why do I overeat? Why do I eat, you know, finish everything on my plate? You know, why do I, you know, whatever it is, you know, for everyone who overindulges, there's also people who are too restrictive, and that's a problem too. But why do I do these things that make me feel bad? And it's asking the hard questions, like, you know, and it's being that detective again. Is it is it because I'm really hungry? Is it because, you know, I skipped lunch? Is it, you know, because I really want a hug in the moment? and and I can't have that right now, or there's no one to hug, it just, you have to ask yourself those questions. And then I always like to have my clients make a list of what would make you feel happy. Sometimes it's taking a
Mm.
dance break. Sometimes it's calling an old friend, or getting outside or putting your feet in nature. There's so many things that make us feel good. Food isn't the only thing, and it's having that list, having that really accessible in your mind, or if you need to actually write it down, but knowing that there are other things that can make you feel good and maybe not even bring you to that place where you feel any sort of guilt or shame.
And put it on the fridge. The list of fun things
Exactly.
to do. Yeah. I love it. Yeah, because sometimes we eat when we're not even hungry, but it's because we are missing fun and joy and love in our life.
Yeah. So I crave chocolate. That's a really good example. And I just want, I'm not perfect. And so just, we're sitting here having these conversations. I'm far from perfect. I make choices I still feel bad about, but now I'm equipped with tools to cut myself, that inner critic, out and say, stop it. But I always crave chocolate in that, like, not always. I crave chocolate often in the afternoon. And I could say to you, oh, I'm low in magnesium, and come up with something, some reason. But the truth is, chocolate is fun. And if I'm working too hard, if I haven't gotten up on my desk, if I haven't planned in, a little bit of time to just take a walk or pet my dogs or whatever, then that chocolate is represents fun. And I know that now. So instead of the chocolate, I do those other things. So it's really about just bringing that awareness to yourself, and then knowing yourself, and that really helps to reduce guilt, because you're armed with options that actually do make you feel good, and release that shame around some of the not so ideal choices.
Beautiful. I love it. I recently got these pens off Amazon that are pens that you can write on glass or stainless steel. They're meant for writing on wine glasses. So I guess if you're, I don't know, at a friend's house, everyone can write their own name, so you only use your own glass. Um, but I got it originally for arts and crafts, but I started writing on directly on the fridge. And I think this would be cool to get these pens. They're like $5 and they come in all kinds of colors. And so people can just write on the fridge, write things that bring them joy and fun little activities they can do. But I wrote on the fridge, what do I need? And it's
Oh,
my
that's such a good question.
yeah, it's my pattern interrupt. Like, what do I need? Because I've been struggling lately with. So I went plant-based, and my body started craving meat. And I'm like, I just cut out meat. I just, and my body was like, give me the turkey, right? So I started eating meat again, and now in the last 2 weeks, my body's like, I don't want to eat meat anymore. And I'm like, just make up your mind. But that's just the body. The body's going to tell you, okay, I'm deficient in this. Give me this. If you start listening. So I'm listening to my body, and it's saying like quite heavily, like, I just want the kale salad every day for every meal right now. And it's just really
Right.
funny because I went from wanting one thing to wanting the other. So I don't believe in one diet dogma, because the body goes through changes and phases, and it wants different things, and we should listen and become more intuitive with our eating. So what do I need? I wrote that on
That's
the
great.
fridge, and it's like I'm standing there in front of the fridge, and it's like if I wasn't listening to what I need, I would I don't know, be cooking up some salmon burgers or something, but my body's saying, "Give me the kale salad." So I'm listening to what do I need? What do I really need? And sometimes what I need is a glass of water, because we oftentimes get thirst and hunger confused. So it
Totally.
allows me just to say, "What do I need?" Listen to the body, take those few breaths that you said, and not react, come from a place of reaction with food, but come from a place of,
Proactive.
yeah,
Yeah.
proactive, listening to the body
Yeah.
first.
So it's like, what do I need and how do I want to feel? And what your
Mm.
point that you just made is, it goes back to the original point I made about how a story is always evolving. It evolves with the seasons, with hormones. There's so many ways with on vacation. We are constantly evolving. We're evolving as humans, and we evolve with our, the way that we our physiological and our emotional needs with food. And so as long as you can allow yourself to be flexible and stay tuned in, then, your food story will just keep on, it'll shift and change, and there'll be things that stay with you forever, but there are also, parts of it that you will need to be able to fine tune, depending on what's happening around you and within you.
Brilliant. Beautiful. Thank you so much for coming on the show today. I just love what you've shared with us. I want to make sure everyone knows about everything that you do. So you've got this wonderful podcast, Once Upon a Food Story. Now tell us about the other programs that you have, about your books. Uh, can people work with you one-on-one? Just let us know everything that you offer.
Oh, thank you for asking. So the podcast just launched in January, and I'm having the best time talking to people. I can't wait to have you on the show about their food stories, because just sharing our stories is such a great way to connect and to heal, and everybody has something interesting to share, and that the audience can identify with. That's my favorite. So tune into that, Once Upon a Food Story. And I have I just rebranded from Kale and Chocolate to myself. So of course I have a blog and I have a recipe section, and, lots of resources, a shop of all the, my personal favorite choices. But I have some new programs and ways that, from a VIP day to learning to how to pass on, like, it's called Legacy, and it's all about, like, just creating a healthy food story for your family and your loved ones, in addition, obviously, to yourself. So that's on the program section of my website. And I am working on book number 2. Book number 1 is called Whole Food Energy. I almost forgot the name. It's a collection of 200 recipes that are really simple, easy grab and go. And then my next book is all about food story, surprise. And, I'm on Instagram as Kale and Chocolate. I'm there daily, posting usually food photos with a, photo of me thrown in. And it's all about, from recipes to mindset shifts. And, that's a fun place to just show up and give a little snippet of wisdom or fun on a daily basis.
Awesome. Well, I'm gonna jump on Instagram right now and follow you.
Oh, I will follow you back. And then the other thing that I have on my website, I have a book, an ebook that I created. It's free. It's called 5 Easy Ways to Stop Stressing About Food. And this is a really good place to start if you just feel stuck and not sure how to start rewriting your food story, start changing. It's some of the things that we talked about, but with lots of links to recipes and different ideas on how to just move the needle a little bit in your mind, too. So I've gotten great reviews on that, and it's a good start, like little bite-sized pieces of information on how to relax more around the choices you
Cool.
make.
Awesome. I have to know, what is it like to be a contributor to the National Institutes for Health? I mean, that's NIH is so huge, and what was it like to be part of their movement?
Well, it I feel really honored. Had a grant for 4 years, and the way I teach a class called Cook In Together, because I go to the Children's Inn at NIH, and that's a place where families or the patients and their caregivers come and they stay while they're having medical treatments. And most of the patients, they're like young kids or kids in their early, not kids, up to young adults in their early 20s. They're there because conventional medicine hasn't worked, and they're oftentimes doing clinical trials. And so
Mm,
they'll come from all over the world. And what has been so fascinating for me is that they're really stressed. I mean, there's
yeah.
financial hardships and health hardships, but we all come together in this space and they connect over food. And I'm not ever talking about like that this is going to heal you or make you better, but I just point out the positive, parts about eating color or whatever, but it's just more that I can see how their stress melts away when they're in
Mm,
the kitchen and they're all together making food that's fun and colorful. And and empowering them to do this on their own when they get home. I get the most amazing, I like want to cry, I get the most amazing emails and messages from some of the families who've been a part of the program just saying my daughter's drinking green smoothies now, or she's asked for, I make little bliss balls, which instead of having, a processed food. It's dates and cashews and coconut and lemon zest, or there's a chocolate version, but they're saying she's asking for bliss balls as a snack. So it's really just, nice that, like, to teach them that they, this is just one more step in the healing process in a pretty stressful situation.
That's
Um,
beautiful.
yeah, and then some of the other work that I do that I'm really proud of is I'm on the board of the environmental working group, and it's
Nice.
just a really unbelievable resource for anyone who wants to be educated about the food that you're putting. We talked a lot about organic, and they do the Dirty Dozen and the Clean 15, which are, the foods that are the Dirty Dozen has the most pesticides, kale being one of them, and those are foods that you should choose organic, whereas the Clean 15, avocados, for example, you can eat conventional. Those foods conventional, they're the least toxic in conventional versions. And they do the Skin Deep app and, the sunscreen guide. And it's just really important work in making our environment a healthier and safer place to be.
That is very cool. Thank you for relieving me of my avocado stress because it's so affordable to to buy avocados now from Whole Foods. I believe they're like the least expensive avocados when they're conventionally grown, not organic. But I've been so concerned about the pesticides because anything that's high in fat will transfer toxins better than something that's low in fat. And so you're saying that they've determined that conventionally grown avocados are not dangerous in terms of transferring pesticides to us.
Right. On the Clean 15.
Nice.
So, yeah, it's
Very
good.
cool.
And all sorts of information. You want to any question you have, anything you want to know, usually you can find anything with food and safety with toxins. That website
Hmm.
is a really great resource for keeping, your body and the planet safe. It's amazing. I mean, the amount of information that you can get on ewg.org.
How did you get on their board? Did you just message them and tell them you love them and you want to help them?
No, I did a lot of work beforehand. I felt really connected to the mission,
Hmm.
and I knew that, as an entrepreneur and single person, there's like only so many people you can reach, and I just wanted to be part of a bigger platform. And I was thinking about, like, what impacts me the most, and I realize, like, from the moment I wake up, with the toothpaste I choose, the water that I'm drinking, that EWG is a part of my day. Like, their research
Mm.
really affects everything that I do. And um, I held some events, I attended events, and it just was a really natural fit. And now I chair the development committee. So I'm very involved. I'm not, I'm a pretty active board member. And I feel really good about that work. Like it's a non-paid board position, but I feel so good about giving back in that way.
Do you find that when you started to feel really good about giving back, that it spilled over into every other aspect of your life?
Oh, definitely. So that's a whole conversation. Don't you think everything is connected? When
Yes.
you make better choices with your food, you think clearer, and then you do things that, make you feel better, and better choices in your business, or just even the way that you respond to your children, you're less irritable. It's all connected.
And they've done studies where they found that those who volunteered were less likely to be depressed, and even in times of uh, great turmoil in their life, by volunteering, it provided them a sense of purpose, a sense of
Mhm.
community, and so those who volunteer are healthier. So you're fulfilling your purpose and you're giving back, but it's also giving back to you.
Exactly. I have It's interesting. I have a blog post where it's about boosting your mood really. And I did write about how like perform a random act of kindness. It's just something that you could do, pay for someone's, coffee behind you in line or just, anything. It doesn't matter, but it does really it's boost the mood of the person who receives it, but
Yeah.
also for you too.
And do lots of random compliments. I love complimenting people, like genuinely. Like I'll see a woman
Mhm.
with a beautiful scarf or an amazing blouse or something, and if I see something that someone like looks like they're proud of, I'll say, "Oh, I love your haircut," or "I love your blouse," or "That's, those are such cool shoes." And it's just in passing, and almost always they light up, they're caught off guard, and they're just like, "Oh, thank you." Like, "Oh, someone noticed." And I feel really good cuz I'm just acknowledging someone, connecting for a few seconds, but it's some just reach out to people and connect with strangers as you walk
Mhm.
by can make us feel, like we're not so alone. But I love it. Random act of kindness, volunteering, it's everything spills over into everything. So,
Mhm.
the
A and also you just brought up it's the connection
Mhm.
to yourself, connection to your environment, to your kitchen that we talked about before, connection to the people that you're eating with, and it's just connection is so key. Just when you feel connected to all of that, that's really when you can come from a more empowering place and do things that feel really good, mind, body, and soul.
Brilliant. Beautiful. Well, thank you so much. This has been such a pleasure. You're welcome back anytime, and I can't wait to be on your show.
I
Is there
can't wait.
It's going to be great. Is there anything you'd like to say to our listeners to wrap up today's interview?
I've probably said way too much,
No, it's been great.
but um, I think that the most important is really to be flexible. I mean, I come from a place of like rigidity, a story of rigidity, but just to allow yourself to not get stuck in the rules or have this preconceived notion of how anything in your life has to be. It's okay to have dreams and goals and visions, but be flexible along the way. And I want to go back to my word. It's all about evolving, and allowing yourself to do so. Keeps life more interesting and realistic. And I think it's empowering for people to know that they're always changing. The story's always changing, even in a little bit. And it's a more freeing way to live.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure. I cannot wait for you to come back on the show and connect with us again.
Well, thank you so much for having me. You do an incredible job, and I love what you're doing and how much you're sharing. And I would be honored to be here again.
Awesome.
Thanks, Ashley.
Are you looking to optimize your health? Are you looking to get the best supplements at the lowest price? For high quality supplements and to talk to someone about what supplements are best for you, go to takeyoursupplements.com, and one of our fantastic true health coaches will help you pick out the right supplements for you that are the highest quality and the best price. That's takeyoursupplements.com. Takeyoursupplements.com. That's takeyoursupplements.com. Be sure to ask about free shipping and our awesome referral program.